Imagine for a second that King Charles were to visit St. Paul the Apostle. I bet that we would be able to gather a pretty large crowd, won't you think? Now, what if Jesus was to appear here in the church? I suspect, I hope, that an even larger crowd would gather to see Jesus. That's not really surprising to me because first of all, we're fascinated by miracles, but also we have a deep desire, a deep yearning in each and every one of us to see Jesus, to be with Jesus, to meet Jesus. I think part of it is because ever since the ascension of our Lord back into heaven, haven't we felt a bit, maybe in our heart, in our lives, that maybe we feel like we were left behind? That now our Lord Jesus is far from us. That's a bit odd to think like that, I think, because Jesus' very last words to his disciples were, "I will be with you till the end of the age." I will be with you. That was Jesus' promise to his disciples. That's Jesus' promise to me, to you. And Jesus is not the kind of guy that breaks his promise. What if I were to tell you that Jesus has kept his promise? That Jesus has remained with us, among us. From the beginning, we Catholics have believed that Jesus is really, truly present in the Eucharist. Not in a symbolic way, not in a representative way of Christ, but truly, really, actually present. Now, some might think, come on, Father, that's in the Eucharist, that's just a piece of bread. Or maybe as I've heard a few months ago, someone tell me, oh, that cracker thing. No. The Eucharist is Christ. It looks like bread, it tastes like bread, but it is Jesus. It is Jesus, fully present. That's what we believe as Catholics. Our feeble senses might fail to grasp the fullness of the mystery that's before us. And so because of that, from time to time, heaven sends us a reminder. Heaven sends us a reminder in the form of what are called Eucharistic miracles. You might have heard that before. Eucharistic miracles. There have been many Eucharistic miracles in the course of history, but one that is the most prominent happened in the 8th century. So let's do a bit of time travel here. Let's time travel back to Lanciano in Italy in the 8th century. There was a priest who was offering Mass in that small town of Lanciano, and that priest was going through a period of doubt in his life. He had a lot of doubts, especially when it came to the Eucharist, that Jesus would be really present after he would say the words of consecration, after he would celebrate Mass, that Christ would really be present. And so this priest, at that particular Mass, at the words of consecration, the host miraculously, visibly changed in his hands into flesh. The wine, after he said the words of consecration, actually changed into blood. Now you can imagine the shock on that priest's face, right? As he's holding the Eucharist in his hands. That's called the Eucharistic miracle of Lanciano. Google it. That's one of many that have happened over the course of centuries. That consecrated host, that precious blood is still on display in that town of Lanciano, in that same church. Now fast forward 12 centuries, because we're modern folks, right? We like science. In the year 1971, Dr. Edoardo Linoli, who was a professor of anatomy, of pathological history. He's a chemist and an expert in clinical microscopy, and also happens to be the head of the pathological anatomy lab in that region's hospital in Italy. He was asked to conduct some rigorous scientific studies on that miracle, to verify it, 12 centuries later. So he took samples and did the science, did what a scientist does. 2 years later, after his studies and findings, there was another commission by the World Health Organization that did experiments independently to verify Dr. Linoli's findings. And here are some of these findings, these conclusions that both came to. The first is that it is indisputable that that consecrated host was real human flesh. That blood was real human blood. Indisputable. Science says indisputable. The second is that the flesh was identified to be a muscle tissue, a particular muscle tissue of one of the valves in the human heart. The blood type of the precious blood and of the flesh was of AB blood type, the same blood type that was found on the Shroud of Turin, which is believed to have been the shroud that covered Jesus' body in the tomb. The protein distribution indicate that at the time of the miracle, it was fresh blood. In addition, they did not see any traces of preservatives to preserve that flesh, to preserve that blood, adding a further miracle, in my opinion, that flesh and that blood did not decompose over 12 centuries. Being fully on display, exposed to air, it didn't decompose. From time to time, heaven sends us a reminder to help us believe. In our gospel, we heard, the night before he died, at the Last Supper, Jesus took bread. He took wine. He took the bread in his hands, blessed, broke it, and gave it to his disciples, and said, "This is my body." And then he took the cup of wine, and he said to his disciples as he gave it to them, "This is my blood, the blood of the new covenant." For 2,000 years since the beginning, Catholics have believed in the real presence of Jesus. That is, that Jesus is really, truly present in the Eucharist. That after the priest prays the words of consecration, the very same words that Jesus has prayed at the Last Supper, the bread and the wine change in substance. They transfigure, if you will, to become Jesus' body, blood, soul, and divinity. Yes, it's still under the outward appearance of bread and wine, thankfully, right? Because it'd be pretty awkward if it hadn't, we'd be called cannibals. Yes, it's still under the outward appearance of bread and wine, but it is truly, really Jesus Christ. In my opinion, the real miracle that happens when we have faith and eyes to see, the real miracle that happens isn't only the fact that it changes in his body and blood, but it's the fact that that host in my hands doesn't explode. Because God's divinity comes down and humbles itself to be present among us. That's why, ultimately as well, when we celebrate the Mass, there are the smells, the bells, the structured prayers that might be foreign to us around the altar. That's because this is not common. This is not casual. Something's happening. A miracle is happening. Why would Jesus do that? Why would Jesus humble himself to come to us as a consecrated host? Jesus becomes present in the Eucharist so that he can enter into your heart, so that he can enter tangibly into your life to give you strength, to heal you, to strengthen you, to give you grace to live out your baptism, to live out your identity as a child of God. Jesus makes himself present in the Eucharist because he wants to be one with you, to transform you from the inside out. Jesus wants to come into you so that whenever you receive him at Mass, whenever I receive him at Mass, whenever we all receive him at Mass, we become one with one another as the church, as his body. That's why your presence matters. That's why you coming to Mass matters, is so that we can become one with one another in him. Brothers and sisters, let's not take this for granted. The church gives us this day to celebrate his body and his blood, not to take it for granted. The recent statistics in the States, and I think in Canada were not too different, says that 70% of Catholics don't believe that it is really truly Jesus Christ in the Eucharist. You're probably that other 30%. Chances are you're here. It's our witness that needs to bring back that 70% to encounter Christ in the Eucharist. It's our witness. It's our sharing of our encounter with him in the Eucharist that will bring them back to see, to meet, to encounter, to receive him. If King Charles was to visit this parish, crowds would gather, no doubt. If Jesus was to appear, even bigger crowds would come. Jesus is here. Jesus is here in the Eucharist. He is here at Mass, as he promised. As he promised. He did say, I will be with you till the end of the age. I will be with you till the end of the age.